Hi, and welcome to this live reading from Exiled South by Harriet Cannon, and this is presented by Itsy Bitsy Book Bits. Prologue. Lizbeth Gordon and Dan Keller fell in love on a Mexican beach in 1988. She was at loose ends after 3 years in the Peace Corps. He was celebrating his MBA, getting by on his good looks and a few Spanish phrases. They swam and shopped village tiendas and had amazing sex. One night, as they sat on a sand hillock, admiring the moon over the Pacific, he teased, "If you are from South Carolina, why don't you have an accent?" She decided to test his mettle with the truth. "I dove into social justice my last year at high school, so I wanted to go to a liberal university up north where I could do more." She shot him half a smile. "I danced around the house for hours when the scholarship to a college in New Jersey arrived." She nodded to herself, remembering her naivety. "But I hadn't reckoned I'd get harassed for my small-town southern accent. One guy in English class was a ruthless jerk. He smirked at the way I talked, said my daddy was probably Ku Klux Klan." "That's harsh." "It was. It pissed me off when people from Ohio or New York judged me for where I'm from instead of the person I am." She smoothed the frayed edge of her cut-off jeans to keep focused. "I made up my mind life would be easier if I fit in. I have a good ear for languages. By June, I sounded like a mid-Atlantic television reporter." She'd meant to stop there, but changed her mind. "Truth be told, there's more to why I don't say much about being Southern." "Tell me." Lizbeth sucked in a breath and cleared her throat. "My circle of friends believed we could usher in a new age of rainbow races and cultures. We brought speakers to campus, danced to Michael Jackson's Thriller album, and celebrated when Alice Walker won a Pulitzer Prize for The Color Purple. Remember those days?" "I do." The warmth of his exhale ruffled her hair. "My senior year, I signed up for a course in African American history." She remembers the charismatic visiting professor's easy smile like it was yesterday. Those who wanted a decent seat in the theater-style classroom arrived early. "A girl often sat near me. One day our eyes locked across the aisle. On the way out of class, she introduced herself as Angela, but we didn't chat again." Lizbeth's voice faltered. Suddenly her throat was full of phlegm. God damn it, she'd started her story and she was going to finish no matter the consequences. She cleared her throat. Angela waited for the perfect moment to drop her bomb. The syllabus topic that day was politics of reparations for enslaved people. During question and answer time, Angela stood. She introduced herself as Angela Gordon, a proud black woman. She pointed at me. "Over there is Lizbeth Gordon, my white cousin whose ancestors enslaved mine in the Piedmont area of South Carolina." I was appalled. My granddaddy Gordon was from the Piedmont. Lizbeth covered her heart with her hand to keep it from bolting from her chest. Retelling the story was like being back in that classroom bathed in a shower of shame. She sucked in air until she could continue with a steady voice. "The professor invited Angela and me onto the stage with him. He made a big deal of facilitating a reconciliation conversation on the spot. I said the institution of slavery was a low point in human history and apologized for my slaveholding family. That wasn't difficult. It's what I believe. But standing at the podium with Angela while she and a couple hundred of my peers fired off questions about my white Southern family crushed me." "Why didn't the professor intervene when it got nasty?" Lizbeth felt Dan's arms draw her close. I don't know. Angela had seized the spotlight and was on a roll. She produced a photograph of a mixed-race woman, my granny's mama, and passed it to the professor and then around the room." Lizbeth bit the inside of her cheek, remembering the triumph in Angela's voice when she said, "Enslaved women can't say no to the master." Angela grabbed my hand and raised our arms up in a salute to the class. "Behold the cousins!" The class clapped. A few even whooped. Lizbeth sat up and rolled her shoulders, wishing she could roll that afternoon out of her life. Angela produced a camera and asked the professor to snap some pictures. She pulled me in close. Lizbeth's lips twisted in a grotesque smile. "Cheese, please," Angela said, and I complied like a puppet. No one noticed Angela's thumb and index finger like a crab claw at my waist. I had a bruise for a week. Wow. Yeah, it was awful. Retelling the events of that afternoon made her nauseous. Did you know your ancestors were slaveholders? Well, kinda, but not specifically. Lizbeth wet her lips. Slaveholding before the Civil War wasn't exactly dinner table conversation at home, but yeah, I heard stories. Yeoman farmers like my people could buy a slave if they had a couple of good harvest years. I don't doubt Angela's story. We could be related. I get her anger. She must have experienced racism as well as her family's stories of enslavement. It's odd she would want a picture of the two of you. Angela wasn't finished with me. Lizbeth shivered, and Dan gently folded the edges of their colorful Mexican beach blanket around her bare legs. The next week, she and I were on the front page of the newspaper with a caption that read, Angela Gordon, student with enslaved ancestors, finds her cousin, Lizbeth Gordon, fellow student and descendant of slaveholders. That was mean-spirited. It was, Lizbeth said through pursed lips. An editor at the paper had called me for permission to print a picture of the reunited cousins. I knew if I refused the editor's request, Angela would have spread the word I was a racist. Nightmares of those isolated last months at college still plagued her. I spent the rest of my senior year pinned with a scarlet letter, watching my liberal friends pass by on campus like I'd developed a peculiar body odor. She reached into her pocket for a tissue. Dan pulled Lizbeth deeper into the crook of his shoulder and kissed the top of her head. Did you talk to Angela again? No, I dropped the class. After graduation, I didn't go home to Neely, South Carolina. I worked as a waitress in Charleston until I got a job as a Peace Corps volunteer. Now it's time to head back to the States, get a job, and get a life. Lizbeth looked into her lover's face. Her lips quirked in a wistful smile. Dan squeezed her shoulder and returned her smile. Why don't you come home to Washington State with me? Chapter 1. Olympic Peninsula, Washington State, December 2009. Lizbeth Gordon reheats last night's chili, fills her wineglass with Merlot, and sits alone at the kitchen table reading the sounding news. It soothes her to pore over local news and gossipy letters to the editor late in the day. Between school district politics and a depressed student in her office this afternoon, she needs soothing. Where's Dan? At 7:30, she calls his cell, which goes directly to voicemail. She leaves an upbeat message. Dan's become touchy when he's tardy. Is he punishing her by sending her calls to voicemail? That seems a little paranoid, but, well, his behavior has been odd lately. Last week, they'd argued about his long hours. Then he did a 180 and teased her like the old days. Elizabeth, my darling, you're stalking me. Life is more fluid with Josh and Robbie at college. Lighten up. I worry when you're late. Don't. Dan's been her rock for 20 years. How can she doubt him? 6 weeks after they arrived in Washington State, the home pregnancy test confirmed her suspicion. She had trepidations about starting a family with a man she'd only known a couple of months, but Dan organized a party and passed out cigars. They settled in artsy Port Benton. Dan started his dream business as a marketing consultant for Native American casinos and small resorts propagating like mushrooms on the pristine Olympic Peninsula. When Josh and Robbie entered kindergarten, Elizabeth entered graduate school. Family life and work were a dream come true with only a hiccup after the twins left for university. She'd burst into tears while stirring spaghetti sauce for two instead of a crowd of teenage boys. Dan had hugged her till she smiled again. She'd rallied by starting a counseling practice after school hours, and yoga 3 times a week that did marvelous things for her butt. But lately she's been wondering what's up with Dan's evening meetings. Elizabeth knows she's a master at facilitating conflict resolution in everybody's life but her own. Damn it, something's fishy. She gets up and dumps her dishes in the sink. Dan can clean up. She tops off her wineglass, takes a sip, changes her mind, does up her dishes, wipes the counters down, and starts the dishwasher. The rain pounds like a gorilla clogging on the roof. Concerned, she opens the door onto their front yard and breathes in the heavy, wet scent. The wind whips her exhale into white smoke. In the glow of the porch light, thick drops dance on the front walk. She hugs herself standing in the glassed-in porch of their 1940s-era home and floats in memories. When Josh and Robbie were young, the porch was full of boots, standing in hunks of dried dirt, piles of sneakers, and scooters that belonged in the garage. Now, the shelves Dan built to provide some order are empty except for her gardening boots, a couple pairs of Dan's running shoes, and a small bag of birdseed. She stares into the angry storm, takes a sip of wine, and speed dials Dan's cell again. It goes to voicemail again. Dan had a meeting in Port Angeles. He'll be traveling on a rural road with a reputation for landslides and wrecks. She's got to distract herself until she can wrap her arms around her husband and know he's home safe. Cell in hand, Elizabeth ascends to their upstairs TV room with each step pounding a note of frustration. Dan still teases her as he always has and brings her flowers on Friday nights like he always has, but lately he prefers reality TV instead of classic country music to relax. Exactly when did mindless entertainment replace their shoulder-to-shoulder time on the couch dueling over New York Times book reviews and politics? And yet, when the lights are low and the music is right, they satisfy each other in bed like they did at 20-something. They're fortunate to have that in middle age, right? All kinds of stories, including husbands with wandering eyes and partners with porn on the computer, drift around the teacher's lounge. Elizabeth decides there's no reason to micromanage Dan's intentions. She clicks the television on.